In this mini tutorial, I'm going to go over how I like to paint fur. I'm painting my figure onto an already established landscape painting. If you're interested in the first part of this tutorial, it's a 15-minute voiceover video that goes over how I painted the background for this piece. It's available for the Starlight tier patrons, and I'll link that below. This month's creature was the Rabbat, which is part rabbit, part bat. So the first thing I did was transfer my drawing using charcoal transfer paper. You can see how I only transferred the most basic lines. I'm going to start by filling in the base pigment for my creature. I'm using red umber mixed with a little bit of raw umber for this base. I want my figure to have a little more red so he stands apart from my bluish background. I'm using a 1/8 inch angled shader for this step, and you can see how I'm just lightly dabbing the paint onto the board. I'm also working from left to right so I don't accidentally drag my hand across my painting. For the wings, I'm going to use raw umber and just fill in each section. They're going to have a different texture than what's on the body. I'm going to switch to my pointed round brush and clean up some of these edges. I'm using Payne's Gray mixed with raw umber for these darker areas. I'm outlining each finger of the wing because I don't want to lose the lines I already have down. I'm still working with Payne's Gray for my shadows and just lightly buffing them in. With my pointed round detail brush and nickel titanium yellow, I can start to add some of the smaller details on the wing. I really want that leathery texture to show through. I'm just going to work my way throughout the wing, adding my nickel titanium yellow highlights and then blotting them back. Now that I have a solid base down on the wing, I want to go back to the body of my rabbit and start adding some fur. I still have nickel titanium yellow on my brush, so I'm going to use that to start adding some fluff onto this little guy. The paint I have down is still wet, so this new layer is mixing right into the paint on the board. I can use it to push and pull things a bit. The wing furthest from the viewer is not going to have as much contrast as the one that's closer. This will help give it the appearance of distance and make the image seem more three-dimensional. Just like I did before, I'm filling in each section of the wing with a mixture of Payne's Gray and raw umber. I like that parts of the background are showing through this wing. When dealing with atmospheric perspective, elements that are further away tend to have less contrast and take on the colors found in the background. With my pointed round brush, I can sharpen and refine the rough outer edges. Before I started working on this painting, I oiled out the surface using walnut oil. This is helping the paint glide along these borders, giving me nice clean lines. By tracing over some of the lines using a lighter pigment, I can give the bones and the wings more dimension. I'm going to go back to the body of my rabbit and start adding some shadows using Payne's Gray. I'm trying to keep in mind where I want the shadows to fall. I'm going to try to give his lower half more shadow and then bring the light up to his face and shoulder area. I create a mixture of raw umber, nickel titanium yellow, and white to create this soft tan that I'm going to use as a base for the upper half of the rabbit. With my angled shader, I dab the pigment onto the board. I'm working my way up to the head and ears. Using my pointed round, I'm going to go ahead and trace over my ear outlines. I really want the face to stand out, so I'm going to make the outer edges dark and then bring the light into the center of the face. I'm using Payne's Gray for these darker areas. You'll notice that for the figure so far, I've been switching back and forth exclusively between two brushes. my pointed round and angled shader. I really like the precise lines from my pointed round brush, but for filling in larger areas and blotting, I prefer the angled shader, especially since this brush is older and has a bit of a frayed tip. I'm using Old Holland's Red Gold Lake for the iris. I want to carefully fill in the whole area. I'm not going to add any highlights at the moment until all of my flat colors are in. And then here's some Payne's Gray for the pupil. And let's go ahead and outline the eye as well. This really makes the colors stand out. I want the eye to look more dimensional, so I'm adding a little more Payne's Gray to the top where the eyelid would be casting a shadow downward. And then with Nickel Titanium Yellow, I'm highlighting the bottom portion of the iris. And let's add one specular highlight. I still need this guy to pop a little more, so I'm going to darken his face a bit so it really stands out against the background. Once all of these areas have been filled in, I can go back and add my highlights again. I'm using my pointed round to paint all of the little hairs. I like to save these final details for later on in the painting. If I would have painted the highlights first, they would have been blotted away when I added my darks. And then my darks also wouldn't have turned out as dark after mixing with the highlights. This way, I still have my shadows and my tiny details are visible as well. So I let the painting dry before adding this next layer. The color in the rabbit's coat is still too cool, so I'm painting a glaze of raw umber over the surface of the board. This pigment has been thinned slightly with a drop of walnut oil. I wanted to wait until the previous layer had completely dried before doing this, so I wouldn't accidentally wipe anything away. Now I can add my last highlight pass. I'm using Griffin Alkyd White to paint in the areas that I want to be the brightest. I'm keeping in mind what areas I want to have catching the light the most. The bones in the bat wing are getting some extra sharp points of light. The material here would be more shiny and reflect more light than the fur would. And lastly, I'm going to brighten his eye with a little more red. This is a bat bunny after all, and he seems like he needs something more otherworldly about him aside from just the wings. And then I'm going to repaint the highlights on the eye. So there you go, a Rabbat. This was a super fun challenge and we plan on doing one of these each month. We'll be announcing the creature for May soon. And we always love it when you guys join in as well. As always, I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any suggestions for new tutorials, please let me know in the comments below. I've had some really good suggestions recently that I'm going to try to shoot next month. Also, I hope you guys are all staying safe and healthy during the crisis the world is facing right now. Your support means so much to me, and I'm keeping all of you and your families in my thoughts. I just hope this is all over soon, so stay safe. Until next time, bye.